in the universe? What lays beyond the Earth? Who is out there?
This is Captain Wayman speaking. Welcome aboard my ship, the ISS Vanguard. I hope you're ready for the greatest adventure in human history. You may think you are scared, but you are not. You are curious. Who has ever gone where you will go?
What is that thing?
Weapon bank destroyed.
All hands! Brace for impact! On the bucket!
Thrusters are damaged.
We're going to hit!
We're off the charts, sir.
We'll have to turn back.
All hands on deck!
I almost beat ISS Vanguard. Almost beat it. Almost. But here's the review of the entire game because I know how everything ends in the campaign and what a journey it was. I played only solo, but I have plenty of thoughts on multiplayer gameplay. So what is ISS Vanguard? Well, it's a massive story, and that story is centered around this giant ship that was one day built from alien crazy technology that crashed into Earth. Naturally, the big question is, we should find out who sent this alien technology to us. Plus, scientists found that human DNA contains something dubbed the Divine Coordinates, giving us a map to somewhere in the galaxy. People from every nation packed into the ISS Vanguard, searching for answers, and our journey starts as the crew is just about to reach the Divine Coordinates. Well, stuff is not exactly what it seems, requiring further exploration of the universe. So you gotta travel to a bunch of different space systems, exploring and carrying out missions on planets you decide to land on, while also managing the ISS Vanguard and crew along the way, meaning there's two main parts of the game. You'll read plenty of log prompts to advance the story, manage different sections of the ship, upgrade characters and gear, basically anything you would expect from a massive journey across the universe to infinity and beyond. Oh, and then there are tons of unlockables. With all that being said, ISS Vanguard is a 20 to 60 hour campaign for 1 to 4 players, where each session takes about 2 to 5 hours to complete. Before we move on, yes, the title checks out, there are no spoilers in this review, and there's going to be censoring everywhere on spoilery things. A couple of early campaign unlocks do have to be talked about though, like the second map, or some other cards, but these won't affect your approach to the main storyline at all. The parts that are a little more spoilery will be warned about right before I talk about them, and again, it's nothing that would ruin the story if known. Okay, let's get to the review. Here's a quick how to play of ISS Vanguard. The game is 2 parts. First, the exploring of a planet where you move miniatures around a map, use the game's 3-colored dice system, encounter bad guys, it's the meat of the game, okay? The second half is the ship itself, where you open a literal binder of cards to manage the ship. Let's actually start with this ship phase, where you take steps to see what situations ail your ship, look at all your cool upgrades, and oh yeah, keep tabs on your objective. Then you'll pick a system to fly to with this other booklet, using energy that your ship generates for every ship phase. It's good to hang out in a system and do a bunch of stuff, because once you pick somewhere to start exploring, there's no turning back. You just grab that landing card, put it in your planetary scanner, beep beep boop, find out a little bit about what you're going to be encountering, and nope, you don't go to the planet yet. Rather, you can do even more management of your ship, from researching cool new technologies, advancing production projects, recruiting new crew members as cannon fodder, pretty basic colossal sci-fi ship stuff. Then you pick a sweet ride called a lander to go to the planet you chose before. Deck that lander out with mods, pick what crew members you want to actually perform the exploration, grab equipment that might be useful, and then you strap in. Strap in indeed, because often there will be some turbulence that the game explains to you as you try to land, and your lander attributes will come into play as your crew attempts to bring your lander to the planet's surface as you roll dice and see what happens. Sometimes people get hurt or you'll lose equipment, but eventually you'll be on the planet's surface. This is the planetary exploration, as your group disembarks from your lander and you'll be assigned a new mission, like maybe exploring some certain area. On the way to that, there will be sectors you'll need to explore completely to continue moving across the map, global planetary conditions to worry about, and sometimes threats moving around. Every turn, each crew member, aka player, will get 2 actions where they can move, draw cards, or spend their action to do the crucial dice check. This dice check is the core of the game, where areas will just tell you, oh, time to roll a bunch of dice. And then you'll see what icons or quantity of dice you need to hit. You can pick as many dice as you want, then roll them. You can use cards from your hand to modify the results too. Yellow outcomes are called partial results that can give you something extra, but be careful about always trying to get these since they'll take away results from hitting the green outcomes. You'll also want to be careful of hitting the red, failed results on rolls, since that can do all sorts of bad stuff, like making you roll a danger die which can cause injuries. When you hit the green result, either immediately or by moving up a success marker, tons of things can happen. Sometimes you'll be replacing the sector card, or giving you leads that you draw out of a bag to put on decks of other cards to eventually get precious material for your ship. And then the fun outcome is reading a log, where you open up this logbook, go to the proper number, and see what happens. Oh, and you're constantly going to be reading this log booklet for tons of other things in the game. Once you finish any type of dice check, all the dice you use go to your discard. There's also plenty of ways to make your explorers just spend dice outside of dice checks, like taking an action to move on some paths. This is kind of the idea of planetary exploration. You just go to places and then see what happens as you optimize your dice and cards accordingly. As an action, it's pretty important to rest too, to recover half your dice and draw a card, but doing so reduces your supplies, so you can't stay on the planet forever. Also, at the end of your turns, you'll draw an event card that will usually do something bad depending on the location you are, so even more reason to hurry. Once you've completed your mission, you can choose to keep exploring the planet, or you can get back to the chopper, lander, and then call it a day. If you don't complete your mission and still want to or have to evacuate the planet, you get mission failed. Some negative stuff may happen, but you can always repeat the mission. You'll get them next time. Oh yeah, you know how we mentioned crew members can get injured? Well, for each injury you get, you also get a yellow dice to roll every time you perform a skill check. And if you match a die to the injury card, something bad happens. If you get 4 injuries, you can die, and that's mission failed.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Also, if you're on the same area as a teammate when they perform a dice check, you can assist them, meaning that you can roll 1 die, but also use cards from your hand to modify the results. That's the bare bones of this giant campaign game. Most of the time, you're on planet, and on your turn, you'll have 2 actions. Then you draw an event and resolve it, rinse and repeat for every single crew member until you succeed your mission or you fail it. Not all the explorations are quite like this. The gameplay loop can change, but who knows what you'll experience as you witness all the stuff in the galaxies beyond. Maybe you'll meet other life forms. Maybe you'll have to do some fighting. Maybe you'll have to research some technologies you never thought before possible. Who knows? Actually, I know, so let's get on to the rest of the review. Pros time. And starting with the game's components, this game is just awesome on the table. So quick disclaimer, we have the Sundrop version of ISS Vanguard with the Close Encounters box for minis galore. Oh. Normally the game has gray Explorer miniatures and standees for all the threats, equipment, and lander ships. But since we have all this cool stuff, we're gonna show it, and gosh, do the minis look great. There's a mini that holds a die, frickin' awesome. With the sun drops, you end up having 2 Explorer minis of each color, but really every single miniature looks completely different, and you're totally able to reassign them to different colors using the rubber cushy rings. These feel great to just use. Then you can't forget this mini for the ISS Vanguard itself, though it has been completely useless during gameplay and is just there to look cool, but it does look cool. But the smaller ships, the landers, give a real sense of realism when deploying on a planet. And man, you can even see the words Faust, hopefully I'm saying that right, on this honky one. Threats are just, incredible. There's all sorts of shapes and sizes, and minis of equipment, like turrets, just give everything a nice sci-fi survival/exploration look. The dice are super solid, being all engraved, going on the indented areas of players' boards. You even got this nice area for spent dice. This whole system is just awesome for keeping the 3 colors nice and organized. Then these areas for character cards and charges are real nice, with arrows to keep you organized. When you're not using the dice, you can even put them in your color's very own tray, which actually houses your section specific things, like rank sleeves for your members and cards you will bring to the planet. Actually, shout out to dividers for pretty much everything on the 2 main card trays, which house most of the cards in the game. There's dividers with art for the smaller cards and also for the bigger cards, and there's even hard cutoffs in the tray between groups of cards. The way the trays are oriented make the most commonly used cards during exploration a breeze to find and look through during gameplay. Just look at the numbers at the top and flip through when needed. All these little other pieces you'll constantly use, like energy or command tokens for the ISS Vanguard, lead tokens you're taking out of a drawstring bag, and even these universal purple cubes are all fantastic quality. And there's lids for a bunch of containers with symbols on these lids. Then we gotta talk about the ship book. school binder that reminds me of middle school, which is actually just a fantastic idea to organize the cards you'll get. No longer do you have to write down objectives or neatly organize a separate deck dedicated to another phase of the game, because this binder's got you covered. Open up your ship book that is really a binder, flip to the page, put your card in, and then the card's just always there. Whether a card is in a sleeve or not, they go in fairly easily and come out fine. It's just like a trading card game booklet, but higher quality with the bumps behind each card slot, okay? And thank goodness the planetary explorations are all inside a booklet. You just open the booklet to the right page, follow the printed instructions, and you're mostly good to go. Anyways, as you can see here, you have all these well-organized elements from your ship binder, scenario booklet, section trays, and the 2 massive trays for cards. So setting up and cleaning up this massive game are actually fairly easy considering all the stuff. There's an included save option that just basically has you stuff everything back into a plastic sheet that is definitely an upgrade from a plastic Ziploc bag. And then there's really clear instructions to get your game going again. And awesome directions on the side of the box to fit everything once you're done, but the game doesn't close completely. We gotta continue with the awesome art that will really bring you into the world of ISS Vanguard. There's an included comic booklet that gives a quick backstory, but really, there's gorgeous art everywhere. From the planet art themselves, to cards you'll put on the planet as you explore sectors, and even the ship booklet has stuff to oogle at. I mean, we already saw the minis for these things here, but man, huge props for having the whole picture come together with minis and art. Oh, and look, there's even more awesome art on the cards you'll play. There's just so much art on the sectors, and descriptive text. I hate all sand. I hate it. ISS Vanguard also comes with 86, yes, 86 crew members which you can recruit and play as. And each one has their own nice pinup and backstory. No, like seriously, there's something for each character to really help sell their identity, what they do on the ship, what their life was before ISS Vanguard, etc, etc. This all sounds like we're moving away from art, so let's go to some miscellaneous appearance pros. There's mostly clear symbology throughout the game, like sacrificing versus spending dice, or preventing you from moving from a space, or even what type of biome you're on. And if you need to check them, there's a fantastic guide near the end of the rulebook. Lush leaf-looking biome means you're standing on anything with vegetation. And the rulebook, like everything else, is absolutely gorgeous and quite clear to follow with tons of examples. And look at this attention to detail. What's this? They really did this to me. Just play the tutorial though. Yep, the game has an in-depth, pre-set up tutorial with its own decks, where you play as a prelude with tutorial cards and characters that all carries over to the main campaign. You could not know anything about ISS Vanguard, then after setting up the card trays, play the tutorial without reading any rules. The gameplay pros time. So the meat of ISS Vanguard is when you leave the Vanguard itself and go on an planetary exploration. And for what it is done fantastically, with so much to praise in terms of giving a sense of exploration, while still having decision making in terms of managing dice, character abilities, or abilities you might see on the planet itself. So first we gotta talk about the dice check system, where you just grab dice and perform a check on a card. But this is far, far, far from brain dead. The colors and symbols really do matter as you pick what dice you decide to roll. See, certain colors only give access to certain symbols, but even among one color, the dice are different. You see these 2 dice? Both red, but they give different symbols. At some point, dice will have multiple symbols on a side to evaluate. So you gotta decide how to increase your odds with seeing what dice to use and how many of each color. You can always play it safe by including another die, even one that doesn't seemingly have your symbol because of this wild Vanguard symbol, which is anything. Even if it's not normally in that color. You can often just push your luck no matter what the check is. Since you spend the dice you roll, you want to succeed to not waste your action, so maybe you should add more dice? Or maybe you go a little greedy and go for the yellow outcomes as well, which sometimes will automatically lead into the green outcome. There's tension from rolling the wrong symbols to get the red bad outcome, so sometimes you don't even want to include too many dice that could backfire on you. Or some of these checks make you roll a danger die during the roll, so you don't have to keep subjecting your explorer to danger. There's dice manipulation abound too, where every character's ability can always transform basic symbols into their specialty, or cards in hand will give rerolls or crazy benefits if you want to spend a die for something outside of the check. Once you start throwing in equipment, you can get even more conversions, or one-time uses of a bunch of symbols added to a check. When we add up all these things, ISS Vanguard gives a good sense of dice management when surveying the board. You see what checks need to be done for each character, ways to get advantage for each roll, and then if you have a bunch of dice, then you also have pretty good agency on choosing how many dice to use when you're rolling. The way you recover dice is also well nuanced. So as covered in the how to play, you can just do the normal rest action, which will cost your group a precious supply, but you also get to draw a card in addition to recovering half your dice. But maybe you rest in certain relaxing sectors to get a benefit, so position around that. Spending supplies all the time to get back half your dice is dumb though, because sometimes you'll want to do this super cool thing called exert to delete a die for the rest of that session and instantaneously get back 5 dice, no action required. So on your turn, you can suddenly exert, get back a bunch of dice, and you're good to go, just with 1 less dice overall. It's a really cool balance between losing out on long-term strength with less dice, with getting tons of tempo now. Add that to the possibility to get back dice through cards by rolling certain icons on any check and discarding that card, and you have your hands full of ways to recover dice, and how to spend dice to ensure you don't run out of dice before you can efficiently recover them. Last pro for this dice check system, injuries. The effect on these on each crew member really do come through, as the injury die that comes along with each injury leads to fitting tension for your character. It's really a sense of ongoing pain, as your crew member loses dice from being exhausted, or gets more wounds from being severely wounded. And remember, this is in every check from now on. Maybe you perform less checks with this character since it's risky to do so, and have him play more of a support role now. And for injuries, a couple of them isn't the death of you, there's cards to take care of their dice, or even buffing you when injured. Yeah, the card system with the top and bottom abilities for each card deserves some spotlight too. Cards are tied to your dice well, where you don't really want one without the other. For example, the all too important re-rolling dice so you don't waste your die roll. You get more out of everyone's hands too when you are assisting each other on the map, so you have more incentive to work together and discuss what the heck you have in your hands. The cards also have a huge added bonus in essentially granting extra actions, where you can just decide to roll dice on your turn as an action to try to match symbols. So man, that just opens up a lot more push and pull with spending dice to also spend cards so you can have more dice, or more cards. See how these are all tied into each other? How about debating how many times you should use this rank 3 card's top ability within your deck cycle of 10 cards before sacrificing it for the bottom ability? Add this all to how you get to choose what 10 cards you want to bring to each exploration, and there's pretty thoughtful card play about predicting what cards you'll draw, and learning what types of cards suit your varied characters and types of planet conditions. You'll learn how the different colors or sectors of the ship start to differ with some nice initial and emergent asymmetry. Security is all about protection. They can be a hero to take injuries, then mitigating injuries. Recon is about exploring, being efficient towards speeding around the planet and controlling time elements, which can help buy breathing room for your team. Engineering is about gear, benefiting off their sick equipment that they have tons of access to, like moving it around or just performing better next to it. Then science is about investigating, being careful with checks, and getting more leads to get more raw materials for the crew back aboard the Vanguard to study. These are different strains that all have their role to play throughout your massive journey. And if you're playing with less than 4 players, you want to see what combinations of sections work together for missions, as you get to choose which colors to bring for each session. That's not even all the asymmetry. Like, you have different quantities of dice per section, which is marginally cool, but then you have the huge amounts of equipment each section can have, which is really cool. This equipment section is going to have some minor spoilers on early unlocks, so go to this timestamp if you don't want that spoiled. Okay, let's get to all this cool stuff here. Look at this giant stack in your armory, and you get to choose these for every exploration. It's so varied. Stimulants to inject yourself, live streaming rigs to call your other crew members, and even drones to automatically mine minerals for you. But look at the color of each. That means that some equipment can be restricted per section, making each section feel unique and showing what gear only they can bring during a mission. Maybe Recon will provide a zipline for everyone to speed from your lander to nearby sectors for efficient movement. Or the security section is going to protect us from a scary monster for a bit with their defense system. The science team can enlist the help of portable AI to help investigations, and the engineers have tons of equipment. My favorite is installing this nice little igloo that is like a sanctuary in any sector. You rest there, you get way more dice back. Again, can't go much deeper than this because spoilers, but trust me when I say that this stack of equipment has something awesome for every section, including multiple copies of neutral equipment you'll want to at least consider for every section to bring. You just get more and more equipment throughout the game as you unlock stuff. And equipment just really goes into how much you'll be cooperating with each other on planets. Now, I haven't played multiplayer for the campaign, but I still got to control 2 sections, which is 2 explorers for every single mission, and these guys work together a lot. You're constantly using each other's equipment, eating each other's medicine, and assisting each other. I have to bring up assist again because the assisting person doesn't have to roll their injury dice when making that assist check, and you get access to their whole hand of cards. There's a ton of different crew member abilities that give fun abilities fueled by a set amount of charges, and deciding how to mix and match these is cool. But for the sake of time and this cooperation point, let's talk about the dozen plus ones that really encourage cooperation on planets. Like, hey, I'm a follower who follows someone else's movement for free. Or an alpha dude who loves to get assisted and can change their assistance role into anything. Obviously, you're not tied at the hip, where there's going to be turns of traveling solo. Like, maybe I'll scout ahead to see how we reach that mountain for our mission, because we discussed that you are good enough to handle this check on your own. And then we'll rendezvous next turn, huh? Honestly, half the battle of planetary exploration is planning, because basically everything that we just talked about can be planned. You choose what sections to bring, what crew members for each section, what gear, what cards, what lander. It's all depending on what information you'll be given, either hints from flavor text or clear warnings. Will your team be doing more of a grab and go investigation that prioritizes movement? Are you trying to take care of some big monster? Do you just need a lot of protection and medicine to survive until you complete a tight mission? So much room for customization for different adventures. Yes, even when going back to repeat planets, you get to choose this all again. Okay, that's how all the pros of the core gameplay systems work, but do they come together to feel like you're exploring a planet? And yes, we do repeat. ISS Vanguard really does feel like you're going to different planets and trekking around on any given solar system. There is a huge sense of wonder, as right when you decide your team's loadout, you strap in, punch in a log number, and go! Like, really strap in, because anything can happen. Your lander may not be up to snuff with the new atmospheric conditions, and crew members can suffer injuries before the exploration even starts. Equipment can even fall out during the turbulence. There may be some other scenario-specific stuff involved I cannot spoil. When you finally land on the surface, more of anything can happen, as you read logs and see all the planet conditions you'll face, which could be anything to hinder just movement or give buffs, but maybe only temporarily. There are log prompts to read everywhere as you may trigger things, giving you a real sense of wonder to go and explore. There's even log prompts to read when you fail things, and logs will directly be related to your current task and planet, making them always feel real. As you travel around, you can find all sorts of different types of sectors, like a makeshift campsite to relax in, some secret underground path, or some story bit that will finally be solved with the discovery. Or yeah, monsters can get angry at you for poking around their homes. We kid you not, the diversity is great. Maybe you'll find rotting rooms, winding mazes, icy cliffs with secrets underneath, or you can even do dice checks to talk to weird NPCs. Man, if only I could tell you about that time I went to this solar system and then the alien did that, and then the alien God, it was okay. I can't tell you all that stuff. Even getting discoveries makes the planet feel real, where some of them grant immediate benefits, like drinking protein soup to get 2 extra supplies, or discarding an alien plating to add a bunch of alien knowledge to a single dice check. Wait, do you want to consume these discoveries now, or haul them back onto the ship for the scientists to put them to good use? There's even effort poured into having the planets transform over time, as day can go into night, or storms come up, or some other crazy weather thing I cannot spoil. Basically, don't take too long, or maybe you wait for a bit for more favorable weather. Plus, because you never know what logs do, you're often paranoid about reading failed log checks, since those can sometimes transform the planet, making it tempting to pump more dice in when doing checks. Revealed threats, aka sometimes monsters, are also nuanced and fun to play around. Each of them have their own way of resolving and moving around the board with abilities and a specific time track, where some of them will be straight up hunters gunning for your crew members all the time, while others are peaceful, at least at a glance. Each time you see a new type of threat, it's up to you to think about how hostile it is, whether you can kill it or not, and what the rewards might be for killing, because when you think you've killed a monster, you read a log and see what happens. The game just doesn't let up on the tension with its taking time, because at the end of every player's turn, you flip an event card, which does something, except when it doesn't match your sector's biomes, like if you're in a desert and it asks for a cave. So then it advances all time trackers. Yep, that can change global conditions to unknown stuff, sectors can slowly fade away, or your window to complete your mission is getting smaller. Or a monster gets progressed to attack your team with its unique ability. It's a feeling of real uncertainty when you have a bunch of these time trackers, and you have to draw an event, and you're super tense about what can happen if your event moves that time tracker, because a lot can go wrong. And then luckily, the game has plenty of ways to play around time trackers if you wish to do that. Nice job, Recon team. Exploration just ends up giving a ton of things to do aside from the main missions, with sometimes optional missions, valuable unique discoveries to grab, or even just getting a bunch of normal discoveries. There's also a little mini-game of getting to rank up your current crew members by accomplishing a task, which isn't perfectly done, but definitely something you can play towards. It's really up to your crew to decide how ambitious you want to be in accomplishing all there is on the planet before you run out of time. Plus, when you finish your main mission, the game will usually let you stay on the planet, letting you decide how greedy you want to be in gathering more discoveries or doing side missions before time runs out or before that monster mauls a crew member to death. Like, sure, it's good to get more goodies and unlockables and all, but pursuing these can move you away from the lander. And when you're already so deep into an exploration, your explorers are probably already hurt and tired, but anything can still happen, and so they could have a higher chance of dying from too many injuries. Explorations really do run true to time too, because at some point either your team will completely run out of resources and fail, or you'll lift off successfully after doing your main mission plus whatever the heck you had time for. The last pro for the planetary exploration is that the gameplay meets the theme well. You're a specialized crew with all this high-level sci-fi gear, departing from your lander, and then you're gonna see all these unforeseen circumstances. You endure planet conditions, face persistent threats moving across the board, and exerting yourself and maybe even getting exhausted if you're not careful. Like, the injury mechanic really comes together and getting freaked out by an alien threat attacking you, then panicking, and then your character starts constantly second-guessing themselves on every roll afterwards, having to re-roll their wild results, and sometimes just throwing away supplies. Or your backs are against the wall, and you're constantly eating nutrients and injecting yourself with stimulants to get the last energy you need to escape the planet. Get on the lander before they leave you! So that's where I would normally end the pros, but this is a campaign game with an overarching story, so how's that? And it's pretty good. In your quest to find out what happened past the events of this comic book intro, there'll be plenty of twists and turns in the story. It'll involve different NPCs, some other life forms you'll find, and of course, lots of decisions for the ISS Vanguard on what to do when faced with dialogue, scientific, and even moral decisions. So reminder here, I almost played through the entire game, went 17 sessions in, and I got to the third or fourth or fifth to last scenario. But I went through the entire log booklet all the way through to speak about the story for this review. And it is worth going through in its entirety and doesn't have anything jarring. Like, if you're into sci-fi, it's definitely par for the course. And there's plenty of realistic nods at the way technology and culture affect things, where you'll read the logbook and go like, oh, that's how that alien thingamajig works, or oh, that's a cool way of explaining how the bad guy works. I can't really say more than that without spoiling the story, but what I can say is that the narrative, aka the way the story is presented to us, is well done. We already discussed how thematic and varied the planetary exploration is, so let's talk about the Awakened Realms specialty, this giant logbook with almost 1,000 entries. These play off each other in the classic Awakened Realms way of referencing each other in checking off boxes, so your decisions can carry throughout the entire campaign. Since we're on a ship with a ton of people, you're gonna witness all sorts of different logs, from AI speech, the away team talking, the captain talking, scientists' journals, and even top secret data entries. This gives a great sense of scale to a ton of differing viewpoints on the overarching campaign of the ISS Vanguard that makes everything feel real and tangible. Awakened Realms actually streamlined this log booklet well too, as when you're checking off boxes here, it's the only box ticking you have to do, as the ship booklet saves everything else, like project upgrades and all your objectives, to prevent even more marking of stuff to grow. And you know how I kept saying that planetary exploration is tense and there's a lot to do? Well, the open-ended nature of ISS Vanguard's campaign means that you can usually go back to systems and planets you've gone to before and do missions there. If you want to be a completionist and try to unlock everything in this game, you totally can. There's hours and hours and hours of gameplay here. So let's talk about the ship itself, because that is also doing a pretty good job at telling the story of the entirety of the population of the ISS Vanguard. There's people with jobs on board that aren't just the away team, so there's groups researching new technologies for you or building more production projects like new landers for your away team to use. Or they can make new equipment for you to start using. Even the ISS Vanguard itself will get stronger. It's not all fun and games though, because there will be situations you have to spend effort to dissolve, like people starting to worship weird stuff, maybe there's some mutinous thoughts, or maybe you just want to pass the time with some board games. Look, without spoiling further, it's pretty similar to anything you could find on a big ship story like Battlestar Galactica, okay? Just a lot more, tech-centric. The upgrade loop will go like, your awaiting folder will get tons of cards as you encounter things on a planet, and then when you're back on the ship, you take those cards out, which can lead to getting even more cards for your awaiting folder. All these cards means fresh new possibilities that are just around the corner, giving tons of incentive to keep playing the game and try out all these new things. New equipment, Your group will go like, oh, now that we slotted this upgrade in, this can help us combine that information from that planet. Let's go back to that planet now. Or, hey, I ranked up. Want to run this planet back now that we know about this secondary objective, and pick up some mineral discoveries so our research team can unlock the other mystery that's been bothering us? If you have a group that has valuable hangout time and you want every single session to feel different, well, it'll definitely feel that way when doing a lot of the main campaign storyline missions. The pacing at which the story unravels also feels very fitting. There's constantly logs that are dropping hints about the main story arc, whether or not you're doing a main mission. Plus, there never feels like there's filler in this system maps booklet, and you can always skip less important systems if you really want to. Oh, and then big fun secret, there's a hidden envelope with some goodies at some point, as well as a campaign progress page you'll get to unlock. What could both of these be? They're good and manage the progression pretty well. I want to add that doing research projects is incredibly forgiving to give the campaign a great sense of smooth progression, because at a glance, them asking for specific discoveries can slow the game down. But a lot of discoveries, when you get them, can be discarded to draw another type of discovery. So you'll rarely find that you're held back by just one discovery, which would otherwise mean having to go back on a planet to spend at least 30 minutes or so to get one thing. Yeah, that's grindy. Last little bit of progression we haven't mentioned yet is recruiting more crew members to use. This process in of itself is fun in its flexibility, where you get to choose what color sleeve they go into, so what type of section a person gets allocated to, regardless of their current ability. So that means there's a fun minigame there and seeing where there might be deficiencies in your ranks and filling them. All the crew members have a tangible use on the ship to feel like real people at your command, where you can use them to boost or speed up progress on areas of the ship, using them for tempo there while foregoing a chance for them to do the next planetary exploration and rank up. And managing your available crew members isn't just limited to the shipbook part of the game, where sometimes the game will ask you to have them interact with other parts of the game, but I can't really go into that too much because spoilers. Okay, so now let's talk about some miscellaneous pros before we move on to cons. First is that when a game asks for your team to decide on a decision as a group, like what to say to an NPC, how to fly your lander, or a moral decision, it'll say that a certain section's vote will be tiebreaker. This is a nice bump up from it just saying, first player breaks ties in most games, because it's a really thematic way to see how different sections of the crew would have influence over the events going forward. Then the whole experience runs pretty true to time overall. I mean, ignore the game found claim of the game taking 90 minutes, but rather use the rulebook claim of the tutorial running 3 to 4 hours and then regular sessions running 2 to 4 hours. And we already talked about planetary explorations not dragging, so this adds up for the entirety of the campaign to take really 20 to 60 hours for smaller groups, pretty similar to the box, but the 20 hours is probably only possible once you know all the rules inside and out and take the fastest route. Like, I play really fast solo, and I'm not second guessing myself on crew loadouts or dialogue prompts, plus I don't have to read entries out loud, and I got the fastest solo session to take 1 hour after about 8 dozen sessions. I would say average sessions for me solo are about 2 to 2.5 hours. If you're playing multiplayer, expect each session to run at least 3 to 4 hours and then the whole campaign to be north of 60 hours. Oh, and then some final missions in here are just going to take longer because they're just trying to be harder. Our very last pro to wrap up this huge list up is actually the app. There is a free app to use, and it was the main way I chose to play the campaign, and it is really nice to automatically keep track of your progress. They even included this little tech tree minigame which helps save time. The app helps the experience come together with the audio cues that work exceptionally well to hear sci-fi sound effects, like radio transmissions, and the snippets of dialogue of crew members talking to each other.
Anything. No wonder we couldn't detect this thing.
If you're playing multiplayer and reading text aloud, this is especially useful to have the app change the voices for you, so you don't have to tire yourself out in improvising voices in the moment. But hey, maybe you want to do that, and then you have the log booklet if you're a full-on analog sort of person. See, choices are good for everyone. Okay. Now we get to the cons of this sweeping campaign. So you know how we praise the rulebook and tutorial in the pros? Well, for the most part, they do a pretty good job of learning the game, but they seem to be lacking in a couple areas. After you finish the tutorial mission, the game tells you a couple of sentences on what the next phase of the game, the ship phase, is. Then you perform some additional steps, and then you read a final log, and then you're off to ship management. But wait, this ship management is just a bunch of steps, right? How could that be confusing? Well, it's because there's no diagrams to really explain everything, especially on a macro level in the ship book. Unlike the rest of the comprehensive tutorial that set a high bar with its decks of cards and sequence turns. When you go to the rulebook for clarification on ship management, all it does is tell you to refer back to the ship binder. Where are the examples? Needless to say, this type of flipping through a binder and then just slotting cards into slots might be a bit jarring since you just came from moving minis on a map and managing a hand of cards. Don't get us wrong, it's still awesome that the game has a tutorial, but there seems to be a big missed opportunity here in just adding a little more to the tutorial about the ship book. Luckily, the rulebook is correct. Nothing you do in the ship binder in the first phase, and maybe even first 2 phases of the game, won't really hurt you, and it does give you some tips. Then throughout your journey, there's going to be countless little weird questions that come up, with different items, character abilities, and campaign interactions, and there's no FAQ at all in the rulebook. There's a giant FAQ on BGG that helped immensely throughout my campaign, so why isn't that included in the main game? It's super frustrating to have to look through the index of the book, find the thing, then find out it's not clarified, and then have to go to your web browser. There's also this official PDF from Awakened Realms, which is less in-depth but still very useful. One thing that I couldn't find the answer for was, what happens when the time tracker gets to the end of a track and you don't resolve that space with this guy's ability? Does it ever reset, or do we break the threat system? When you're first starting out in the game, you'll also be asked to set up the card trace following instructions in the rulebook. My advice is to not actually follow this exactly, where it tells you to put the cards behind the divider. Actually putting it in front of the divider makes a lot more sense. If you put the cards in front of the divider, you can just easily grab many groups of cards and take them out, you're good to go. If you put the cards behind the divider like they say, the divider is blocking the cards you're going to grab, especially if you're sitting down. Oh, and then they also should have clarified that this planet divider card goes nowhere at first, because I thought I lost my mind not seeing it in the rulebook for the longest time. This sounds a little bit like component cons, so let's get into that. So we're not sure if it's our copy, but we found no standee or mini for this gravitational threat card. So we ended up using just another generic standee instead. Also, it's odd that once you get fairly deep into the campaign, your lander mod page will completely fill up. Like, this is confusing on a mechanical level whether or not you still have these mods in the game, and it's also fiddly as all heck to have the ones that don't fit here be stored in this awaiting envelope. Not sure why there's not another page of this. The player aids and danger check references have good information, but they could have easily been a bit bigger to not be double-sided. A bigger danger check card could have actually fit all the results on one side, because having to constantly flip this back and forth just as you're about to do a climactic danger check is a minor buzzkill. Oh gosh, let's talk about these danger check symbols. They are way too small and not clearly written. Like, geez, putting a black letter inside a orange die shape is not clear to look at. And it's all too often I had to squint and bring it really close to my eye to ensure that it really was the letter I that they were asking me to roll. This is especially annoying when you have stuff like threats on the far side of the table, which have markers on their cards. So you don't want to move the markers off to see what danger check they want you to roll. Stretching across the table and squinting at tiny things, not fun. If you're colorblind too, it's gonna be really rough for you to distinguish green versus blue icons on the dice symbols. I mean, I'm not colorblind, so it wasn't an issue for me, but I know at least a couple guys personally who are. When you're actually moving around each planet, stuff starts to get quite cramped too with all the awesome but still unfortunately obstructing minis. The sector cards just aren't big enough to have all their art, text, and symbols, with minis on top of it, all hang out comfortably. The biome symbols are blocked again. Plus, the sector cards just easily move around due to how you're constantly moving stuff around on the sector, which means you can accidentally overlap sector numbers, biome symbols, or connected path signs. Minis can especially block sight of the "cannot move away from this sector" symbol, which can have some huge consequences for gameplay if missed. Now, all of this mini blockage is just hard to fix, because if you made the cards bigger, you would have to make the Planetopedia bigger, but then it's already so big. Maybe 2 booklets like Jaws of the Lion would be a decent compromise? If you made sector cards Tainted Grail size, it could work, but holy moly, there are 249 sector cards in this game, not including duplicates, so yeah, that is a rough ask. Let's transition into the writing cons, which does have some bumps now and then, like when it sometimes talks in the past tense, even though you're currently in a mission, which is very jarring. Like, it can sound like it's referring to stuff that already happened, but then gives you a decision to make, like what? What mechanically hurts is how the logbook will sometimes, in the later parts of the game, have a bunch of flavor text or dialogue, then end without any other info, especially if you're talking to an NPC. Does this mean you have to go back to do what you're doing before, like exploring the planet? Or can you freely return to the previous log where you asked them the initial question? We're assuming your action just ends, but we would have liked to see the words return back to planetary exploration plastered on more logs. Then let's move on to some known issues in writing across the game, which really need to be fixed before you play to minimize confusion. Just go through the booklet with a pen and include these fixes. There's about a dozen of them. So then maybe even more reason to use the app, which did fix these things? Yeah, the app. So it's good enough to use as we said in the pros, but there's a lot of things about it that just make it a very frustrating experience to use. You cannot go back and look at logs you've previously done. Like, what the heck? This is extremely annoying. And you don't want to just punch in the log number again because since the app is kind of discreet whether or not it's checking off boxes, you don't want to trigger an accidental box check. So you end up using the log booklet for that one log. You can't permanently revert to using the log booklet though because all your progress is saved on the app. You are locked in with using the app once you start, but often you have to dual wield the app and the actual log booklet when confusion comes up. Sometimes you even want to have the log booklet on hand for when it's checking off multiple boxes, as that can be an incredible hint to return. You can change the log boxes by hand in the app called a flag editor, but you're probably not going to know about the boxes if you don't see the boxes in the first place. But at least the voiceovers and sound effects are pretty good. Just know that this app is more of a supplement rather than a replacement for the logbook. Here's some other complaints on the app. It's fairly laggy with no back button at all, and I swear at some point it accidentally kicked me out of a log read. And it crashed about 3 times, but I didn't lose any progress, so not a huge deal. And then the included ambiance is on a super short loop and weirdly high pitched, it's so distracting. You pretty much have to mute this unless you want to go insane, as its repeat is not mixed well. Enough about the app though, let's move on to gameplay cons. So the first one is that the game has a annoying scaling problem where the more sections you play with, or aka probably more players you play with, the more reasonable it starts to get to finish the campaign. This is because having more crew members gives you more opportunities to assist each other on the board, as well as give you a bigger pool of section cards, dice, and character abilities to select from when you're doing checks. With less characters, that is, less sections, sometimes you'll be knee-deep in an exploration and then some type of symbol comes up that you don't have normally access to, so you have to just try to cross your fingers and try to roll wilds. And then you cannot underestimate the basic converts of the characters. Planetary exploration is all about going into the unknown, so even if you think you spec'd perfectly based off the landing card info, missions can take a turn and throw all sorts of new stuff at you, especially when the game gets harder. And taking time to move isn't as punishing as it may seem, as certain missions have certain log prompts to modify this. It's a big hint to play with 4 when hard missions say, hey, you should really think about bringing all 4 of your sections to this mission. Also, having 4 crew members means that if your group ranks up, everyone gets the rank up. So it's like your crew can rank up twice as fast with 4 sections as opposed to 2. Oh hey, the next gameplay con is the ranking up system, where before every single planetary exploration, you draw 2 cards from this deck and then you pick one, and if you succeed it gets removed from the game forever and your characters rank up. The problem is that accomplishing these is kind of all over the place. So ranking up your characters can ask for some pretty specific things to do by the time you end your mission, ranging from very doable to sometimes actually impossible with your current planet. Stuff like getting all the unique discoveries, or having at least 1 lead token on 3 different discovery decks, can go hand in hand with your normal mission. Cool. But others, like having 3 mission equipment tokens when half the landers only bring 2, is like an automatic no-go early game. Or how about discarding a threat, where most threats actually cannot be discarded. Like, sheesh, this needs to be reworked because it's so terrible to pick. To add salt to the wound, completing the prompt isn't everything. Rather, you need to have success tokens paired with it. But most of the time, you get those at a random chance from exploring stuff and seeing what happened there. You can start to see how ranking up is not guaranteed. 6 tokens to level up a rank 2 guy to rank 3 is definitely a tall task. So the game asking you to get both top and bottom of this card on top of achieving your main mission is sometimes a piece of cake, sometimes just impossible. And overall just feels designed around playing with 4 sections, so solo gamers be on the alert of this. Maybe the game should have allowed you to choose from 3 rank up cards instead of 2 after you've already geared up your away team. Cause like with only 2 away members, to get either 3 strange flora discoveries or 5 discoveries in total is pretty rough when you also have to do your main mission and worry about monsters. So luckily there are ways to rank up your crew members without going through this rank up deck, like getting to rank up all your characters after finishing the tutorial, which is cool. And then you might ask, why are you so concerned about rank ups? Isn't having a rank 3 like super good and it's permanent? Kind of, not really, because characters can die permanently in this game. This matters more so in the later parts of the campaign when the game starts getting hard. So there's 2 main ways for characters to die. One is if they get 3 injuries, then have a chance of dying after the scenario. And the other is if some event happens in the campaign and or current mission to kill them off. The latter can be practically unavoidable at times, but the game can give you some warnings if you're not too deep in trouble yet. Losing characters hurts on an emotional level, which is actually pretty cool as you see the homie you've gone with to different planets pass away tragically. But it also hurts on a gameplay level because if you lose a rank 2 or god forbid a rank 3 person, you now regress to a wet behind the ears rank 1 if you don't have any substitutes in your waiting crew members. This just feels bad, as maybe you won't have access to the same amount of dice you spent so long to unlock, or worst of all, not getting you access to all the sweet rank 2 and rank 3 cards. Your deck building possibilities get slashed to just 14 cards for a deck of 10, with more generic options for rank 1, instead of the 20 plus with the strong asymmetric unlocks. It's the game relocking cards as punishment. It can be really crippling in the later parts of the game when you take your best characters to the hard missions because you want to try to succeed the hard missions, and then you get the worst outcome of that mission failing, and then all your characters die. So then you don't want to return back to that mission until you're really ready. So then you have to go back to previous planets and then just grind at least 2 to 3 sessions, as well as repeating the session you failed to get to progressing the game. Will this happen to everyone? Certainly not, because ISS Vanguard is filled with so much game variance, with not only the die rolls and card draws you'll see on each planet, but also what crew members you happen to bring that might sync up perfectly with whatever symbols the hard missions throw at you. Or maybe you'll happen to get some crazy technology unlocked early from a super good discovery card, and that just keeps your game smooth. And then you have multiple rank 3 members near endgame. There's just so much variance on what can happen in your campaign, but this is a warning to those who may not have been as ahead as they thought in campaign strength, like me. Think about how a lot of RPGs don't beat you to the ground too much as a punishment for losing. There's the all too notable JRPG save point, so you can try the mission again or level up your character some more before the big fight. Or in Gloomhaven, failing a scenario doesn't kill your characters off. Like, it's thematic that characters die in ISS Vanguard, but it can regress gameplay so much to the point of being unfair and time wasty. Some ways to patch up this current system could be to make rank ups much easier to do so you have more rank 2 and rank 3 members. After all, in a game filled with dice rolls and punishing outcomes for failing those, it's probably better to have luck on your side rather than not. Or the game could mark that in certain scenarios, if you lose a rank 3 member, then you could at least promote a rank 1 member to a rank 2 to fill in that void. That would really reduce the need to go back to previous planets and grind to beat the harder, longer scenarios. I have some cons regarding gameplay later in the campaign, but I'm not going to get into that until after Nitpicks because those gameplay cons will have some minor spoilers. Now it's Nitpicks time, so we got 2 gameplay Nitpicks and then it's on to the spoiler cons. You know how we mentioned the deck building where you get to make your deck for each section before exploring a planet? Well, this can start to get a little samey when you always see the same cards over and over again, as there's only 14 cards for rank 1 that are in pairs, so really only 7 cards. Now granted, ISS Vanguard is not a dedicated deck building game, but I'm curious if they could have at least sectioned off certain cards to be unlocked as you meet game goals. Cause like, there's so many lander mods and equipment you just keep getting throughout the game, but you never have quite that same magic of getting mysterious new cards for your hand. Sure, this would require more plastic baggies to block off cards, so we can see why they didn't do it, but hey, there's a reason why getting new stuff in Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion for characters is so satisfying. Even just to unlock 1 new card can go a long way. The next nitpick is a ship binders ship facilities page where you do all of the decisions regarding the internal stuff of the Vanguard. So it actually doesn't have that much decision making and is more of a means to going to different story points or to give you some ideas for planetary exploration. It's not half the game in decisions, although it could seem like that at a glance, and especially by looking at some of the marketing material. So you have tokens on the bridge with 4 options to do, and one of those tokens will probably be dedicated to the Situation Bay to take care of guaranteed punishing effects next round, which is thematic, but as you might imagine, starts to get autopilot-y after a while. Barracks also isn't that interesting, as you're getting more rank 1 members, which actually might be more pressing if you're playing multiplayer and people are complaining about their current characters, but if you're playing 1 or 2 players, you have so many options to choose from picking 2 sections out of 4 every exploration. And you can't keep spamming recruitment because you'll run out of card sleeves. Luckily, the barracks does get really good once you get that rank 3 member. This all lends you to usually dedicating your remaining 1 to 3 command tokens to the research or production project areas, which both give very, very good outcomes. So each ship phase mid-game can get quite redundant in tasks. Spend command token for a situation, then see if you want to do research or production projects, or maybe both. Or maybe just do one twice. You can do this in any order you want. This all made the nitpicks because the streamlined nature of this all helps to keep each play session relatively short considering all that's going on in the game. But then it left me asking, if there's not going to be that much decision making, why make this such a convoluted part of the game with so many steps to follow on each page? Like, this definitely isn't a very multiplayer friendly part of the game, with one side of the table having the binder in front of them, probably not reading all the steps aloud, and so everyone else can just chime in on pretty basic stuff, like, oh yeah, duh, we're gonna do that research project the game told us was super important. Then I guess one person could take cards out of the awaiting envelope. This part of the game is more like advanced admin, while people can plan other parts of the game. Luckily, the binder has more decision making when you unlock this add-on facility, and that can get your group a little more riled up and cooperating. So again, this whole ship booklet thing is in the nitpicks. Last annoyance of the ship book, not sure why they didn't make every sheet the same size, because it's a little annoying to flip back and forth, because you're constantly doing that during this phase. Whew, okay, we're done with all the criticisms that were spoiler free. Now I'm gonna get into the cons that have some minor spoilers. This section of cons isn't going to contain exact names or timing of things, but if you want to keep yourself completely unsoiled, go to the timestamp down below. Go to the timestamp below, right there, click on it. Go click, last chance to click. Okay, all right, you're really curious. So there is a planetary exploration in the later part of the game that really starts going against ISS Vanguard's strengths. See, the gameplay loop is best when you have wonder of exploring and adapting to playing around a new planet, facing new threats, and creatively sequence areas to grant you all these fun, vivid exploration moments. One mission starts subverting all these things because it has a puzzle, which is a fine idea in of itself, but the problem is the puzzle just doesn't make sense. It's trying to be weird and otherworldly. I can't really get into too much detail, but a good example comparison is Final Fantasy 15. FF15 is an open world game where the magic comes from hanging out with your buddies on a massive road trip in a breathing world, finding and fighting all sorts of monsters, from large game to huge bosses, jumping around and doing team attacks and having your buddies say awesome stuff. Then for some of the ending, okay, minor spoilers for this game, well, the ending has you just completely isolated from your buddies, and you just walk down a dark corridor and it's not fun and you want it to end. And this is okay for a bit. It really gets the sense of isolation and despair for about 30 minutes. In ISS Vanguard, the crew members, they have each other, so you're not isolated from each other, but you're isolated from exploring in a full-fledged mission that takes at least 1 to 3 hours. It just subverts a lot of what you've come to expect of the game. When planetary exploration fails to give you cool, interesting story bits and exploration to play around with, then it just becomes a lot of dice management. For most of the campaign, it strikes a better balance. This scenario doesn't really, need I remind you, the puzzle just doesn't make sense. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is where I ended my campaign. But I had to read ahead and see what I missed to make this review, and while the missions seem to at least make more sense later on, the difficulty doesn't let up. This is a pretty worrying trend for ISS Vanguard's later story missions because the game wants to make the final missions hard to give you some tension. But then in this core dice rolling system, that just means more dice rolling. More after one another. This can translate to straight up, you can just sit on a single sector and do dice roll after dice roll after dice roll. It's made worse by some travel restrictions, so you pretty much have to stay in one place. I can really see what they're going for here. You are on the final missions, taxing your away team to the limits, and the normal get out of jail free tricks you used before don't do the trick now. But then when you fail again and again, or ultimately lose to have crew members permanently die to regress the game, it sucks. This system can work if you have really good luck on the later missions, or if you just happen to bring the perfectly fitted equipment and characters for these missions. But even if you're doing well, these later scenarios can start burning you out of the dice rolling. If you've already sunk 20 to 40 hours into the campaign, rolling even more dice near the end of the game when you've done it for so long is a tough ask. How could this get fixed? Well, first, either make missions that make more sense, or if it does want to be weird and otherworldly, reduce the amount of dead ends. Then the game could make the campaign overall just shorter, so players wouldn't be as easily burned out of dice rolling, and or the game could lean on the side of making checks and log prompts easier. Let's talk a little bit about the story. Yes, the story, I know I was praising it in the pros, but there's some stuff that is I want to warn about and is kind of a precautionary nitpick. So from what I've seen, and I haven't read through every single log in here, but the main story is surprisingly linear. It doesn't really give players a lot of crucial decisions to make about the unfolding of events for a game that feels so seemingly big, seemingly expanse at the game's outlook. There is one crucial decision that will influence some mechanics and the game end, but you don't really hear about it too much from a log point of view until later in the campaign. If you're expecting Thaehan Grail's open-ended, more NPC-laden story, ISS Vanguard doesn't have as much. Now we get to the recommended score, where we try to critically evaluate the aforementioned pros and cons of the game, with the caveat of whether or not this game is even a good idea in the first place. And so based off of my 40 plus hours of gameplay and beating almost all the missions to completion, and then going through the log booklet and then looking up stuff online, this ISS Vanguard recommended score is going to be a 7 out of 10. It is good. So the number one thing about ISS Vanguard is exploring. That's the thesis of the game, to go out and explore the worlds beyond. And tons of things facilitate this as you go out and explore new planets, and then there's new story points with tons of ways to mix and match all the crew members you have. And then there's the heaps and heaps of unlockables, but you don't buy this game for fighting, get something like Frosthaven for that. ISS Vanguard is mostly about trekking across the planet's surface, finding scientific leads, doing negotiations, or just being thrown into a treacherous planet and seeing what you can do before the time runs out. You're slowly getting weaker as your away team goes deeper into a planet, and then you start eating into their supplies, wondering what's around the next corner. And survivally story bits will happen all the time, whether it be persistent injuries weighing down people's checks for a downward spiral, or crew members freaking out over the intercoms about some new monster that has unique movement patterns. The 10-step dice rolling system offers a lot of possibilities when properly grasped, granting countless ways to push your luck or alter the gobs of dice you'll eventually roll as you keep progressing into the game. It's not particularly deep though, or wants to be, and good thing it goes pretty fast because there is a lot of dice rolling throughout the campaign. The journey of the ISS Vanguard comes alive when the shipbook phase meets the planetary exploration, to give you tons of story bits and cool gear to play around with. And a ton of events, I mean a ton of events, will happen to, in, and around ISS Vanguard, which are all worth checking out. The game rewards you for constantly planning ahead, whether it be some efficient route throughout the universe, or a 15-minute discussion to gear up your 4-man away team with the right decks and mission equipment to succeed. This is where a bunch of our pros come together with a 2-part experience to be an addicting journey, as you unlock stuff from one part of the game that helps boost the other, and then vice versa to keep bouncing around between upgrades and progressing forward. But when the game isn't leaning so much into the open planet exploration, things can start to get a little funky. Some tasks don't quite make sense, feeling hard just for the sake of keeping up with the game's progression, leading to an incessant use of dice checks. Couple that with an unhealthy rank up system, the app not being as good as it could have been, and I'm actually hesitant about recommending the campaign gameplay all the way through. Yes, the campaign is mostly lenient on how you want to approach it, until it's not when the difficulty gets cranked up. It's a sudden 180 in what might have initially drawn you into enjoying ISS Vanguard's planetary exploration in the first place. Good news though is that you're going to get tons of gameplay value by progressing through the majority of the campaign and playing with all the upgrades. You can add in friends to finish up old planets, and there's even an Operations Book one-shot scenario that blends exploration, intrigue, and planning well. It's a little funny that I'm recommending a campaign game for you to not play through the entirety of the campaign, but let's be real here. If you're playing multiplayer, like with a group of people, are you going to put in the 60 to 80 hours to finish this game to its completion? Maybe? Maybe not. There's a lot of games out there to play. So yeah, if the dice rolling checks seem fair or even attractive to you in this overarching premise of let's hop on a giant ship and just go to a bunch of random planets, then ISS Vanguard will not disappoint for its scenarios that most people will ever be able to see. If I was evaluating ISS Vanguard on only the early to mid parts of the campaign, the game creeps up to an 8 out of 10 recommender score. Just make sure you're okay with the possible failures of dice rolls or flipping over an event card at the wrong time, because things can still go wrong even when you poured 2 hours into an exploration and you keep rolling blanks. And worst case scenario is that you also lose your beloved crew members permanently. Fun note that ISS Vanguard is also very family friendly, with no dark or mature themes. During dialogue, when the away team is talking to each other like Power Rangers, it looked like someone is about to say a naughty, dirty word, and then the intercoms just cut off. The worst word I saw was damn during the later parts of the campaign, so that word is okay for family once in a while, right? And the shipbinder is not a gimmick, though it by itself is not going to get you invested into the game. Its organization is very much appreciated throughout the scope of the campaign, but that still doesn't prevent the game from being a huge table hog, and the game still has card management galore. You're constantly taking cards in and out of the card trays, moving cards in and out of your shipbinder, and then you still gotta find room for the log booklet, even if you're playing with the app. If you're the type who just wants to hurry up and play to explore, the ship phase forces you to slow down a bit. Like each page is just a giant checklist of things to do, okay? How is this campaign compared to Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon, which we also reviewed at Shelfside, with a little bit of Kings of Ruin? Well, Tainted Grail is definitely more NPC focused, rife with intrigue as you constantly make decisions to move around a single island. ISS Vanguard doesn't really have that much emphasis on NPCs, at least consistently throughout the story, and once you land on a single planet, there's usually between 2 to 3 paths to go instead of an open world. Plus, there's generally nothing you'll find at said planet that will make your team do a 180 on some type of conspiracy, because you're looking to explore oftentimes with a more research-based lens, not to go out and seek people with juicy intel for you. But things in ISS Vanguard can go oh so wrong, Gameplay-wise, Tainted Grail has free or low-cost explorations, whereas ISS Vanguard will basically have you do at least some type of dice manipulation to do anything on the planet. But then when you do fight, ISS Vanguard is still dice checks, and Tainted Grail is an intricate card system that can definitely feel more like a fight, but again, ISS Vanguard isn't about fighting that much. These are also just entirely different atmospheres. As covered before, ISS Vanguard is family friendly and ends up feeling more like Legend of Zelda with sci-fi elements that can seem cartoonish at times, although some monsters can be kind of gross for Saturday morning cartoons. Whereas Tainted Grail is like Dark Souls or Bloodborne with gory supernatural imagery. Enough about Tainted Grail. Is ISS Vanguard gonna be the campaign experience for you? Well, first things first, I gotta warn again, you need to be prepared for the large amount of dice rolling and card management throughout this game. That will never change, and even if you like the story, you're gonna be suffering over the course of 30 to 40 hours doing all this admin stuff. But where ISS Vanguard wins is its flexibility with constantly mixing and matching characters and gear, meaning that it's probably best oogled at by a talkative, adventure-loving group. This group also doesn't mind too much about random events slapping them hard in the face sometimes. Then, if you like the freewheeling possibility of flying around the universe, with each planet mostly being a session between 1 to 4 hours, with constructing crews from the ground up, then play ISS Vanguard. Just don't expect too much from the game's self-balancing mechanisms or complexity of story. As the owner of this game, you could totally just introduce it to different groups during the course of one campaign, where taking care of the admin and teaching while also playing is definitely doable. Newcomers basically just need to know about the dice check system. With the app, shipbook, butt ton of unlockables, and only some grinding, ISS Vanguard is mostly a win for sci-fi fans willing to spend a good chunk of time. Unless you hate the dice rolling check right away, ISS Vanguard rewards those who at least play with threats, equipment, and the shipbook twice, which can take about 6 to 8 hours for newcomer multiplayer groups. It's a massive and mostly rewarding journey across space systems where Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, or insert big ship that goes very far vibes are real. Oh, and again, play with 4 sections if you're seriously trying to consider finishing the campaign. So if you're playing single player, solo, that means playing 4-headed. All 4 of these at once. 4 decks of cards. Before I start this personal score, my goodness, this was such a journey to make, with me not really being a big solo gamer or a campaign gamer either. See, I can't even say it correctly. I was really curious about this game because of the dice checks for seemingly expedited gameplay and a really cool premise, so take that, Daniel.
Maybe after ISS Vanguard.
Ashton's just allergic to campaign games.
My personal score for ISS Vanguard is gonna be a... You know, actually, let's use a graph for this, okay? This is not perfectly to scale, but here we go. Yep, there we go. After my experience of 17 sessions, 40 plus gameplay hours, I am still pretty uncertain about what my final personal score is, but gun to my head, I have to say it's a 7 out of 10 good. Even though my relationship with the campaign and the mechanics definitely soured near the end, after I cooled down, I thought back on all the cool memories ISS Vanguard and I had together. So I would definitely be down to go on more adventures, but probably next time not as a solo player and as a group. To begin this, I was definitely so curious on what ISS Vanguard had to offer, with beautiful components everywhere and a binder for tons of unlockables. I enjoyed it at first, then played some more. And then I played some more. Then the progression started exploding and I was absolutely hooked. Like, holy moly, I marathoned the heck out of this game, playing 40 plus hours in about 1.5 weeks. So there was times I would play 2 sessions a day. Like, yes sir, let me just pick a planet in the middle of the universe, chart a path to it, command humanity's best intergalactic ship, and then strap into a lander that I've chosen with all my hand-picked mods on it. Like, look at all these minis on the board. I couldn't help but every once in a while make the sound as I landed on the planet and started my exploration. Then I got hit with log 75, and I was just so floored with the narrative stops this game was pulling out. Where the last time I was so floored with the integration of new mechanics after the first couple plays was Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition, with its very intricate NPCs and mysteries meeting the insanity mechanic. Let's get to the nitty gritty with the dice rolling, where I thought I would initially really like it, and I was totally correct. The pushing your luck while exploring the unknown feels very good for exploring some random planet. It was more complex than I thought, and the dice manipulation initially impressed me, and I was constantly chuckling as I'm pairing symbols and rerolls for satisfying narrative reveals. Also, getting injuries feels incredibly thematic in how scary it is. Equipment is also super fun to use, and when it meets the minis on the map, I'm totally sucked into imagining these explorers bounding across planets of all different types, talking to each other over the intercom about cool findings. So I have all this excitement for the game, and then I just keep playing, even finding some more interest in going back to old planets, which impressed me. But then slowly but surely, my enjoyment just diminishes. I found that constant dice rolling again and again for each scenario, mixed with a repetitive ship phase, began to tire me about the 10th time around, aka 25 to 30 hours in. The steady flood of unlocks just didn't change gameplay enough for me to make it interesting, as I'm still just trying to math out gobs of dice every scenario. Not saying that I hate this dice management, I still find it fun, but it's not as exciting as before, especially for the more static scenarios, the one I complained about in the scenario cons, so minor spoilers right here. Yes, that mission tilted the hell out of me, with the puzzle just not making sense. And then it was endless rolls upon endless rolls that just started burning me out of the mechanics of ISS Vanguard. With it flipping a couple rolls upside down, I really lost a sense of exploration and open planet feeling that I loved so much of the game. When I lost 2 characters to that mission, including my homie this guy, I was about ready to call it quits with this game. Yeah, so my best 2 dudes, a rank 3 and a rank 2, just died on one of the crazy missions. I don't know if I want to keep playing. This is... I guess I just stop playing and make the review. I don't know. I feel like RNG, this mission. This is hella whack. But then I kept thinking about the mission and was curious how it ended, so then I went back to try it again. And during this next day, still no dice, and I lost 2 more explorers, including Tyson! So I figured that the grind to get another 2 rank 2s, or maybe at least 1 rank 3, just wasn't worth the time, so then I threw in the towel, spoiled everything myself to make the review, and so here we are. When I look back at ISS Vanguard with a more measured approach, and not just pure frustration at losing 3 of my best characters to back-to-back hard dice checks, I want to go back on a bunch of things that I enjoyed that aren't as mechanically flashy. Like, for a game of this size, setup and takedown were quite respectable with all the nice organization, and the varied art on planets and cards kept me hooked. I also enjoy the story just enough. It's nothing too mind-blowy for me, but I'm still definitely engaged for the ride. One thing that I would have wanted is that because the game is flying you around to all these different planets and all these different NPCs, is to have some art in the log booklet. Important NPCs just went faceless, which felt a little odd to me. Is asking for even more art a little too much? Maybe. I mean, I'm also going fairly fast throughout the game, and playing solo with time constraints on me, so I didn't get the full time to fully cement solid visuals in my head. I could still understand what's going on, but maybe a little visual grease besides the small art on sector cards would help, you know? When I didn't play the game and opened up the log booklet and spoiled everything by going through the endgame logs myself, I had a great visual on what's going on. I started to question my previous enjoyment too. Was I actually having fun with it, or was the game more addicting than actually fun? Oh, snap. Did I feel addicted to ISS Vanguard the same way I felt addicted to video games? This is because I eventually realized that most unlocks don't actually change the gameplay that much, but the act of getting new cards and putting them down was addicting. And so at some point, my brain made a distinction that, yeah, the gameplay loop just wasn't the excellent experience anymore. But I'm not much of a solo gamer or a campaign gamer, and managing 2 sections started to wear on me, and the end of the campaign was not fun, but I will still say I'm really happy I played most of ISS Vanguard. I wanted a campaign game that had dice rolling, and the game succeeded in that, at least most of the time. Me being a time-sensitive guy is always counting the hours of how much board games take, and ISS Vanguard was usually respectful of my time and had lots of story bits to keep me engaged. If the designers made this game even more streamlined and then totally reworked some of the missions, I could see this game raising to an 8 out of 10 personal score for me, because man, was this game hot when it was hot for me. I know a lot of people want more content out of a campaign because it's more bang for buck, but I'm more of a quality over quantity sort of guy. After all, I'm not playing a campaign game for a hoity-toity challenge and oh, I beat the game, I must be so good at games. No, I just want a nice mental trickery every once in a while and a cool overall progression and story. This game should not punish me as much when dice rolls go utterly sour. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna compare ISS Vanguard to a hot and fun girl that I end up lucking into a lot of dates with, even though I'm not too compatible with them. I say this because ISS Vanguard wowed me as soon as I opened the box and read the premise, and there's component flair everywhere. During the initial missions, I had enough to think about with the card play and dice management, but then the more time I started to spend with her, the more I really started to see that me not being that compatible with her, that is, she's taking too much of my time for how much dice rolling there is, and then there's so many cards to keep track of, it was tiring me out of the dates. And then later in the relationship, she started being weirdly irrational and then punishing. But the memories, the memories of those adventures we went on were so vivid, and some of those will definitely make the best of my 2022 gaming moments. Another mechanical system could have also gone on adventures in this log booklet with me, but hey, I'm still glad it happened, and I'm always gonna remember the good. Remember the good, okay, Ashton? Remember the good memories, the good times. Oh, that's it for ISS Vanguard, the review. Doing campaign game reviews are so time consuming, you can see why I don't really do them. I'll have to reconsider doing one in the future, okay? This copy of ISS Vanguard was sent to us by Awaken Realms, but this is not a paid sponsored review. Thank you to all our patrons right here, and let me know if I missed anything about the game, or if you had a different experience. This is a huge game with a lot of stuff going on. Yep, and then we also got our Mad Lads of Cardboard right here. Thank you guys for supporting the channel, and that I hope this will be out by the end of 2022. I hope so. So if so, have a happy new year. Bye-bye. Remember to like and subscribe. Subscribe button right there. Yeah, it doesn't cost you anything, right?